were trying to fight with the systemic information that was coming from the government. So very important here is to note that the persecution of Biharis in East Pakistan during the Bangladesh Liberation War. So Biharis were a variety of Urdu speaking people who had migrated to East Pakistan at the time of partition. So they were very well settled in East Pakistan and were often favored over Bengalis for government jobs. Further, while the Bengalis were stereotyped by the West Pakistani ruling class as semi Hindus or pro Indian and considered to be disloyal to Pakistan, the Biharis were perceived as pro Pakistan, not least because they supported the decision of West Pakistan to declare Urdu as the mother tongue or as the national language. So, over time, the Biharis were acknowledged as the better and more loyal citizen of the ruling elite. So, as the language movement escalated in East Pakistan, the Bengalis, the Biharis, they were preferred over Bengalis in many jobs that was an offer for them in Pakistan, because they were the ones who were supporting the government for the language of Urdu. So over time, had come to be symbolized. They started to symbolize Pakistani hegemony in the eyes of Bengalis. So what happened is that when Pakistan was trying to curb the rule of East Pakistan after the decisive victory in the 1970s election, is that before 25th March, uh, massacre was let loose by the top population in East Pakistan, which was the Mukti Bahini forces and the liberation forces of Bangladesh, and a massacre was let loose on the Biharis of East Pakistan. So Pakistan's version of the Bangladesh Liberation War is that they had to act because a portion of their population was being targeted. So in 1971, on 25th March 1971, Operation Searchlight was launched, and but before that, already 300 Biharis were killed in Chittagong, following which the Pakistani government used the Bihari massacre to justify deploying its military on 25th March. And according to a retired major of the Pakistani army, the Operation Searchlight, it was not supposed to be at the Dhaka University, or it was not supposed to kill anybody. It was only meant to bring it was only meant to bring East Pakistan under control and to stop the violence against the non-Bengalis that was happening. So, however, when the army was passing by the university, by the Dhaka University, the Mukti Bahini, or the Liberation Army of East Pakistan, uh, from the perspective of West Pakistan, was that the Mukti Bahini, they opened fire at them, and the soldiers were then given permission to fire back. So from the 1st of March to the 25th of March 1971, the Awami League had taken complete control of East Pakistan, and it had paralyzed the authority of the federal government in East Pakistan. And during this period, harrowing tales of atrocities were narrated by a large number of West Pakistanis and Biharis who were able to escape from these places and reach the safety of West Pakistan. So again, the Hamudur Rahman's Commission supplementary report, which is the only official inquiry into the 1971 war in Pakistan, estimates that around 1 lakh to 5 lakh people casualties were there. And these statistics also include Biharis, West Pakistanis, and patriotic Bengali. But though the figures are very disputed, it is estimated that anywhere between 3 and 30 lakh people were killed between 25th March and 16th December, which was the date of surrender. However, in the state endorsed textbooks that we find of Pakistan's federal board that is currently in use of schools, there is no mention of the there is no mention of the Operation Searchlight, and history focuses on the week prior to 25th March and particularly emphasizes the violent behavior of East Pakistanis, and then fast forwards to August 1971, when India had signed the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. So coming to the last bit of this perspectives, the various perspectives of the Bangladesh Liberation War is India's stance. So India projected the war as a victory over Pakistan, and the war was hailed as one of India's greatest successes. So to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the war, Hindustan Times, which is one of the leading newspapers in India, it splashed the headline 1971 War, India's greatest triumph. Another headline from India Today read 1971 victory over Pak army was India's finest win. The magazine called it a victory of India's intelligence agencies and diplomacies and the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So, even in the Pakistan Instrument of Surrender, which was the legal document to end the Bangladesh Liberation War, it is interesting to note that no official representative from the Bangladesh forces were present at the surrender ceremony. As you can see in this photo on your screen, that on one side, the person who is signing on a paper, he is Lieutenant General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi from the Pakistani, who was the Pakistani leader of the Eastern Command, and on the other is Indian Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora. And the only exception in this photo was Group Captain A.K. Khandekar, who seems to have been pushed in a corner and he is not quite visible in the cropped up versions of the surrender photographs that is circulated. In response to all this, Bangladeshi author Tahmima Amin writes that after intervening in the war, the Indian army did what armies do, and they behaved like victorious soldiers. Pakistan did not surrender to Bangladesh, rather, it seemed like Pakistan had surrendered to India. Suddenly, the war that Bangladeshi freedom fighters had been waging became yet another skirmish between the two elder children of partition. And those same freedom fighters who were forced to surrender their arms to the Indian troops. Then the reason why India had to intervene is cited as the refugee crisis, which became a humanitarian crisis for India. And it was estimated that by the end of 1971, approximately 1 crore people had sought refuge in India. So, and these refugees were settling in the border states such as Assam, Tripura, and West Bengal. And in some cases, the refugees even outnumbered the locals, which created a resentment and increasing pressure on the already stressed resources of India, because as we have to remember that it was also the time when India was struggling with poverty. So the refugees in India, they were an object of sympathy as long as they remained in the border areas, but as they moved inland, the residents of Calcutta and other places, they began to resent their presence and they saw them as a source of disease and pestilence. So Indira Gandhi argued that the crisis in East Pakistan was no longer Pakistan's internal issue. So since India was hosting close to a crore of East Pakistanis, it was embroiled in the conflict and the refugees had to go back, and for that a resolution was necessary. So um, finally, in terms of India's perspective, a very important point to note here is that advocate Sultana Kamal, who is a Bangladeshi human rights activist, she commented that India has turned Bangladesh into its own business district in exchange for its favors during 1971. So these comments came as critics had raised alarm over the potentially disastrous environmental consequences of the proposed construction of the Rampal power plant in Bangladesh, which is situated just 14 kilometers north of the world's largest mangrove forest of Sundarbans, which is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So the power plant is a joint venture between Bangladesh and India, and in Kamal's word, the outcome of the liberation war could have been very different if India had not helped Bangladesh in every possible way. However, she believes, like so many of Bangladeshis in present, that India must stop using this to manipulate them in order to achieve their selfish interests. She also said that she knows that Bangladesh is a country with the cheapest labor, but that should not give India any right to exploit the people and environment of Bangladesh. So, finally, to conclude this presentation, um, what I want to tell you about is that What also happened in Bangladesh is that the International Tribunal has been investigating and prosecuting suspects for the 1971 genocide. And when asked if they were willing to prosecute all those people who were directly responsible for the genocide of Biharis, members were quoted as saying that the period of war we are looking at is between 25th March and 16 December, and that there were no attacks on Biharis during this time. So, if somebody can come forward and prove and provide evidence, we will try them too, but no one has come forward too. So one can only wonder how safe the Biharis, who are now a persecuted minority in Bangladesh, would feel about bringing forth their accusations in such a politically charged environment. They are already labeled as anti liberation, and I wonder what chance they would have under these trials. So, the period selected, that is 25th March to 16 December, is also very problematic since many of the Biharis were killed before or after these dates. And to neatly package justice in this period is to effectively exclude them from the entire process. Then in 2016, the Bangladesh Law Commission opened a constitution on a draft law called the Liberation War Denial Crimes Act, which followed the precedent of the Holocaust denial laws in Europe. So, if passed, what will happen is that the law would open the door for anyone who questions the official death toll to be prosecuted, and it also outlaws inaccurate representations of war history and malicious sentiments in the press that would undermine any events related to the war. So, since the proposed offices are so broad, any research on 1971, especially ones that might question the 3 million figure or speak about the killing of non-Bengalis, could be constructed as anti-national and therefore subject to very strict punishment. So, in this process, what is happening is that free speech and objective research is likely to become the biggest casualty. And I would like to end today's presentation with this quote that is there on the screen. So, while the Bangladeshi state has recognized Bironganas, the Bengali rape survivors, what they have excluded is the experiences of Bihari women, which has mostly been ignored. So, Yasmin Saikia, in her book Women, War, and the Making of Bangladesh, she shared her conversation with a Bihari woman who told her, "Don't ask me who killed whom or who raped whom, what was the religion, ethnic, or linguistic background of the people who died in the war. Because the victims in the war were the women of this country, mothers who lost children, sisters who lost their brothers, wives who lost their husbands, women who lost everything, even their honor and dignity. In this war, men had victimized women." So, alongside meeting Bengali rape survivors, Saikia also conversed with Bihari women who share such ghastly stories of rape and torture. However, these Bihari women's voices, they remain missing from the macro narratives in Bangladesh. So the experiences of Biharis, they are best forgotten, pushed to the periphery of memories. Just they are pushed to the periphery of society in contemporary Bangladesh, in the post-war Bangladesh. So this was my presentation. Today, what I tried to bring up in today's presentation is all the various perspectives and the much talked about the mainstream versions of history and the versions of history that, since they belong to the minority persecuted population of a country, which has not been brought to the fore. So that was my attempt in today's presentation. I hope it was useful for all of you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Ms. Poulomi Saha, Research Scholar, Department of English Studies, Central University of Jharkhand, to present the paper on the title History Beds in the Lands of Apatanis, Rereading Stuart Blackburn's Into the Eden Valley. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Uh, I'll be presenting the paper. I'll be sharing my screen. Good evening, everyone. The topic of the presentation is History Breathes in the Land of Apatanis, rereading Stuart Blackburn's Into the Hidden Valley.
Your
So,
screen is not visible. Follow me.
okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. So, sorry for the delay. I would like to present the paper on history breeds in the land of Apatanis, readings toward Blackburns into the hidden valley. So, firstly, I would like to discuss about the Apatanis. Apatanis are a tribe residing in Arunachal Pradesh, one of the larger tribes. Uh, Apatanis belong to one of the larger tribes of Arunachal Pradesh, and they are very specialized in cane and bamboo crafts. And their specialization is in this wet rice cultivation, which yields a lot of productivity without use of machines and animals. And they are they have this unique way of fish rice cultivation where fishes are reared alongside with paddy fields. And due to this speciality and this unique method of preserving ecology, UNESCO has proposed the land of Apatanis. The concentration of Apatanis is in the Zero Valley of Lower Subansiri district. So they have UNESCO has proposed to make the region a World Heritage Site. uh, as in most of the cases of tribal societies, they have their own administration uh, among the village. They have their own village council and their own disciplines and rules and regulations by which they follow their life, and this village council is known as the bulia. And uh, what would be the focus is that Apatanis too did not have a written script like most of the tribes across the world. So what they had is the oral tradition in the form of songs, folk stories, couplets, etc. And these were the only means of propagating their knowledge. Now, a little bit about the land of Apatanis. It is in Arunachal Pradesh, and Arunachal Pradesh is a very recently formed state. It was formed in 1987, and it is in the northeastern most part of India. Previously, before 1987, it constituted the NEFA, Northeastern Frontier Agency, and um, within the NEFA, today's Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, and parts of Assam was included. Now, I'm going on to the novel. This is basically a historical fiction depicting the British Raj in India, and it narrates the first contact of the British officials with the Apatani tribe of today's Arunachal Pradesh. In fact, um, even government of India's site cultural sorry cultural site has written that it was the first tribes with whom the Britishers had met is the Patani tribe. And but the interesting fact is that it is written by a white man, Stuart Blackburn, who was born in US but has worked on the tribes of India. But as he is not an Indian and of course not an Apatani, so whatever view he is giving an outsider's view, and that is what we are going to see. So basically, this is a tale of two men uh, of almost the same age group, but one born in the Apatani village and the other born in England. So, George Taylor was a British ICS official who had traveled thousands of kilometers to um, join his duty in Assam, Tejpur. So, he was assistant commissioner, third grade. He joined in Darang district. But one thing which is remarkable is his parents were labor class people. His father and his mother both were, his father was a servant and his mother was a washerwoman. So whatever he had studied, he had gone to college, he had his education, all was um, uh, uh, there was a lady who had just sponsored his education. Now, but after he got success, all his life he had just uh, hid the true fact of his parentage from everyone, and even his eldest child. He had married and had three children, but unable to adjust and cope with the surroundings and with George Taylor, Catherine had left for England, and Charles, the eldest son, had stayed back in India. Rather, George had not allowed Charles to go to England and had kept him with him. George um, posthumous while he was alive, he was a very successful British official, but when he posthumously he had been um, awarded the Star of India. So the second character of the same age group is Gyati, who belongs to unknown village Hari, and he is a Patani. He is an Apatani shaman is who has mastered the ability to move into the spiritual world and negotiate and converse with the spirits, lead the dead to the underworld, and cure people's ailments, everything. Even he had married, and even he had three children, two sons and one daughter, which we again find similarity with um, George Taylor. But Sumpi, his wife, had died while she was very young, and Gyati's greatest failure at this point of time was being a shaman. He was not able to save his own wife. So he remembered all his uh, life. He remembered and was like devoted to Sumpi. He had to remarry, but he had never that connection with his second wife, and he had uh, the eldest son, Como, was Gyati's favorite son, which he himself did not know because he had a lot of differences with his father. The father son duo had a lot of differences and distances. It was one evening when Como was seriously injured, and Gyati, after seeing that, was very tensed and had feared the loss of Como, and then only he had realized that he had or he loves Como the most, and or rather he loves Sumpi through Como. So with time and practice, with um, everything, Gyati had also got success in his field. And both of these men, this George Taylor and Gyati, both of them had met on 15th February 1819 during the first Apatani expedition of the British Raj. So the tribes, the this hill tribes, they always chose their habitations in such a place that uh, the enemies would feel difficulty in moving to those places. So they were on the mountains, and the Britishers were on the plains where tea plantations could be done, and the division of the inner line was also done in this way, so that the hill tribes remains in the hills and they could get the maximum from the plain lands. uh, Gradually, and the Nishi is also a tribe, and the Apatani and the Nishis are in perpetual enmity with each others. And here comes a Nishi contractor who has started to take laborers from the tribes uh, to the to Assam to work in the tea gardens as laborers. And once this Gyati also met Tadu and felt that like Komo could be sent down to work so that his future be saved. And hence he had sent his son to work over there. But there uh, there was a mishap, and Taru was murdered. And due to the murder, uh, there was an expedition, and George was appointed the political agent of the expedition and was sent to judge or here listen to this case. And Gyati, being a shaman, was a good narrator and could. It is considered by the tribe that the shaman is the best one who could tell about themselves, and hence had chosen Gyati to speak in favor or like for the Apatanis. Now, this talk or the discussion between both of this man, both of these men, it went on for 2 days, and the Britishers, they had photographs and had written down the palaver, because whatever Gyati was telling was not uh, what they were understanding, with the help of even with the help of the translators. So Gyati had started to tell from the origin, where he had said, like, the origin of whether the white man or Gyati, whatever it might be, is the same. We have all come from nothingness. And then he had gradually, he was narrating their part of the story, which the Britishers did not find important. Now, uh, the Apatanis used to call the white men as Hailang, or the outsiders as Hailang. So Gyati was in fear that these white people, the officials, they may come and ask for whoever were there while the murder had taken place. And as Como was also present there, he would perhaps be taken away, and he would be losing his um, he would be losing his favorite child. But the Highlands, they had uh, after mm this discussion, what they had uh, asked is just a fine of two Mithuns, and and the liberation of two Nishi captives who were there under the Apatanis captivity. And the gun which they had stolen from the murder place, they had wanted that back. And on listening or hearing to this proclamation that his son would be safe and no one is going to, like, no one has asked for his son, Gyati was very relieved. And somewhere he felt that this white man is a good man. And as a gesture of gratitude, what Gyati did is he gifted George salt, and that too, the salt was ash in color, because uh, staying or residing on the mountains, they don't get salt. As we all know that salt is, like, we get it from the seaside, and even they did not used to come to the plains, so salt was very precious to them. And this salt, they used to prepare themselves by burning a special kind of wheat. So this act of Gyati we can consider as a friendliness, the attitude of friendship Gyati is showing towards George. And uh, the Mithuns which were fined, the British officials found that it was very difficult for them to carry those Mithuns back to the plains, and so had returned the Mithuns back to them. And hence the Apatanis were joyful, and they sacrificed the two Mithans and even invited the white men to feast with them. So here comes the evening of 16th February 1890, when the British officials, three British officials, the white men, are having, or rather were having, sacrificial meat in an Apatani shaman's house. Uh, it is true that there was no remarkable conversation between them. Whatever Gyati was wanting to say was not understood by George and the others, but somewhere an unexplained chord of friendship struck between them. And uh, when George Taylor was leaving, he took Gyati's hand and placed it in his own, and as their eyes met, he plumped the clasped hand up and down. And with this, they had a untold kind of friendly relationship between them. So and then this successful completion of the first Apatani expedition, what it uh, did is George's promotion to the district commissioner, second grade. Now In 1894, uh, by this time, 1890, 91, 92, 93, by this time, the uh, George Taylor had already reported that Apatanis are a non-war tribe. So we can proceed towards that part, and hence the British officials had moved towards the Apatanis habitations, and they had set a outpost at Joram, and they were demanding free labor from the Apatanis. And these tribal people, they have never worked for anyone. Either they work for themselves, or they work out of voluntarily. They work collectively, but they don't work for anyone. But as this was continuing, so they had they were they felt very humiliated, and hence they had struck an attack on the outpost of Zoram, where one British subject, though Indian, had died. And that led to the second Apatani expedition, and it was a punitive expedition. And the Secretary of State for India in London had already said that it should not be a palaver, it should not be an negotiation, but it should be a punishment. So again, George Taylor was appointed the political agent, because he was a successful political agent the last time. And he was also told that you are being the political agent because you will have the overall command. So whatever officials are being there with you, whatever you do is the final thing. And again, Taylor knew that if he completes this expedition successfully, it would mean another promotion for him. And of course, the second Apatani expedition was a successful one, and the newspaper reports and the chief commissioner, everyone was highly speaking of George Taylor, and even he had got his the expected promotion, who what he had wanted. And then he had died at the age of 49 in an earthquake, which was a strong earthquake, on 6th September 1910. So his son, Charles Taylor, was only there in India, and only after his father's death he could come to know about the the truth of second Apatani expedition, due to which due to the success of which he had become his father had become a star. So now uh, Charles, George Taylor always carried a box with him. So he had brought it from London, from England, and that box was always with him. He had never allowed his son to touch that box. Also, few weeks prior to George Taylor's death, the son had wanted to see what was there in his writing box, but he had not allowed his son to touch, and he had always thought that. He will remove all the papers, and then only he will hand the box over to his son. But as it was an accident, he died. And Charles got his diary, in which it was written that the two British sepoys were badly injured at the hands of Apatanis. That is, the British soldiers were injured, but three Apatanis died in the encounter with the British sepoys. But what was important is there were 15 Apatanis in a hut, and in this encounter, three had died, 12 were living, and they were brought in a single file in front of these officers, and all of them were naked, and their hands were tied with cane. And they discussed, and then these 12 Apatanis were taken into the jungle, and we stood and watched as they were led away, not far, only 40 or 50 yards, just inside the first line of trees. Then they were shot, all of them, but they didn't all die immediately. Some crawled and screamed until more shots were fired. Then there was no movement and no sound. We left them there and marched back to the camp. On the way, I realized who the young man was, the one with the familiar face. He was Gyati's son. So the one with whom, like, Gyati was very hopeful that if that white man comes back, they will be safe. But it is under that white man that he lost his son. So what remained is Gyati, bereaved and aged, um, and he did not know why his son was killed. That was the greatest uh, thought which always bothered him, that he did not know what had happened, what had transpired, and why his son was killed. And now George Taylor, who should have been very proud of his father, is in fact uh, ashamed of whatever his father has done, because whatever is written has become the truth, has become the history, has become literature. Whatever has happened, either orally or has not come into public, will never be known by anyone or will not be in history. So sorry.
Poulomi, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
We need to make time for the keynote speaker also. Could you wind up in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'll be trying. So here, what we are saying, that they are very whatever has been written is has become the history. So now, if I go, okay, so the basic of narration is words, and words can change things. The um, right words at the right time can change things, and it was Charles Taylor who had not spoken up at that time, and hence the 12 innocent souls were killed at that time. So uh, if we go to the origin of literature, so the word literature, it comes from the Latin literature, from uh, that is, the litera is the letter of alphabets. From there, the letter of alphabets becomes words with uh, distinct meanings, and from there a couple of words having meaning, specific meaning, becomes sentences, and then from a couple of sentences becomes written documents, and whatever is written document is literature. uh, Even in dictionary today, we will find literature as written document and not oral. So whatever Gyati knew, or whatever the Apatanis knew, has not become literature, because they could not write. And even Gyati had um, all through the palaver, Gyati had seen and admired the white man moving a stick up and down, and pausing and again starting writing, and he did not he was wondering what was that. And later he had understood that that is the secret which they have, and this tribal people, they don't have. And hence the literature and history, so whatever happens is written by the authors. Whatever the society, the circumstances, is always focused. But what is present today will become history tomorrow. So whatever is written today will have its effect on the history of the next day. Now, how history breathes in the land of the Apatanis, because no one has written about the truth of the Apatanis. The land was there. The land has the land is the witness to everything, and the fight was for land. Whatever had happened, it had happened on the Apatani land. The land is the land is witness and will remain witness always of whatever has happened. May it be there in the history books, may it be known to the world or not. And Gyati had said that we do not want the Highland here. We did not ask them to come, but they came. They came, and this is the result. So if they would have not come, this would have not happened. And somewhere here Gyati feels helpless because he has to nothing with himself keep which will pass on or will make the world know the truth of what had happened with him or his tribe and his son all along. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Dr. Beena Thomas ma'am to give a view on the paper presentation.
Thank you. Congratulations, Pashini, Monika, and Poulomi. It was really interesting listening to you all. I should use the word exhaustive. You've taken us to realms that we were not really familiar with. And that was really interesting. And to specifically comment, I will start with Pashini. So you took a novel that was written by Rushdie as recent as 2023, and you were trying to bring about the interconnectedness of literature and history, the balance, and even you use the term holistic perspective. So there is a lot of combination of facts and imagination. Why do you think Rushdie would have combined facts and imagination? And why do you think that he did not just stay with the facts?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, when something is infused with imagination, people start to read it in more interesting way. Just a fact means they literally get tired. Actually, just reading a book which wholly adhere to the documental facts means it's just a historical book only, not a historical fiction, right, ma'am? So only if there is a imagination fact, people start to read it, and it will make people to interest in history as well as the novel also. Maybe that made him to write a novel like this to attract readers to know more about history as well as to engage them in reading a fictional novel.
Fine. So maybe an enchanting experience. And then you did mention that it is a skillful narrative. Any particular analysis that you could do to really understand how skillful the narrative was?
What, ma'am?
Any particular analysis that you could do to substantiate your statement that it is a skillful narrative?
Actually,
Beena, have you come in on two devices?
Let me check. I'm sorry.
There's
Is it
an
okay
echo.
now? I don't
Okay,
think.
then.
Yes, Pashini.
actually, his works usually there is his narration is usually about history and fiction in his novel, like Midnight Children and Enchantress of Florence. All his novel has
Any difference in this particular narrative?
I don't think so. It is repeated only in his novel. There is nothing new to tell. Everything is already done.
Fine. Anyway, good effort, Pashini.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking us through a very recent novel. And moving on to Monika, it was a very interesting, detailing on history. You took us through a lot of voices that were manipulated and forgotten. Although I had a lot of questions to ask you, paucity of time, just let me ask you as to you were giving us the unheard voices. What is the source of that research? Like, that is, where did you pick those unheard voices from?
Thank you. First of all, huge thank you, ma'am, for what you said. It is only very encouraging for a budding scholar like me. So I have done a lot of research. Actually, my PhD research topic is on a comparative study of Bangladesh Liberation War and the Nigerian Biafran Rift of 1967 to 70. So for that, primarily, most of what I talked about today was from Anam Zakaria's book 1971, which is a
So
people's.
how is it different from the regular history textbook or chronicle, or what is it? How, what is the difference?
So,
Is it
ma'am,
not mainstream history?
yes, ma'am. Like I was talking about in Bangladesh's version, as and when the political party keeps on changing, uh, like one of the Bangladeshis had very aptly pointed out that history in Bangladesh at the present moment, it feels like it is a football and it is being pushed from one area to another area to suit the political needs of the times. So the textbooks also, it keeps on reflecting the changes that are there. So to read all the different versions of history that I have come across during my research, particularly the narrative that Bangladesh tries to omit and the narrative that Pakistan is trying to bring in. So it is different in the way that it is people's history. It is the people who are trying to tell the what they have witnessed during the liberation war.
Yeah,
And
understood, understood. But then again, there is a doubt. Which one is the truth, right? Because truism can be defended by another truism.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, anyway, one more question that I wanted to ask is how, because you did not refer much to literature, how much of this is reflected in literature? Is it reflected in your regional literature? These unheard
Yes.
voices.
Yes, ma'am, it is reflected in literature as well. So, one very important book in that regard is Noor by Suraya Khan, where she talks about how a child from East Pakistan or the present day Bangladesh is being brought to Pakistan and raised by West
Is it
Pakistani.
written in your regional language?
No, ma'am, actually, I do not belong to the region, it is just my interest area.
Okay.
So,
Wonderful, wonderful.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, thank you. We would love to listen to you, but then lack of time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Monica. So moving on to Poulomi, that was also a wonderful presentation. You took us to a land of Apatanis. For me, it was a new, what to say, new world altogether. So it was so beautifully analyzed. Again, very, I mean, the detailing was really impressive. So you took us through the truth of the first Apatani expedition, the second Apatani expedition. And I think in your presentation, history as narrative really came through. So here again, I want to ask you, what did this author Blackburn rely on for his facts to write the novel? Are you there,
Thank you, ma'am.
Pauli?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Um, Blackburn has actually, though he has been born in US, he has come to India and he has researched both in South India and Northeast India. He has gone into the places, and what I have found is there is um, relevance, uh, true relevance with these characters in whatever he has written. The expeditions and everything, he has worked over here. He has come over here and he has worked over here.
Fine, fine. Okay. So, and even you concluded by saying truth has become literature. You were so emphatic about it. Are you sure
Pardon, ma'am.
that, I mean, you had concluded your presentation by saying that truth has become literature? That
No,
the history that is depicted in literature is the truth you declared.
uh, actually, literature is still now whatever is written, if we are not referring to oral literature separately, so whatever is written, so the Apatanis has they have not written whatever from their side of view. So whatever is written is from the Britishers view.
Yes.
So whatever this George Taylor, he has written one thing in his diary, but has presented in his report, he has written the complete opposite thing, and he has referred over there that one or two clashes, the tribes were subdued easily. This is what he had used in the report. So that is what has become history, but what has transpired in that Apatani land is not known to
Are there other
much.
oral narratives to substantiate the stand? Have
Uh,
you checked on that?
uh, Not yet. I'm regarding this specific uh, this Patani expedition. I have not yet researched on it.
Good, good, very good. Um, yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do
Thank you.
do any others here want to talk to the presenters? Any remarks, or do I move on?
Yes, you can move on, Beena. Probably they'll come in later with their
Okay.
comments for all four papers.
Can I just make a small comment on all
Yes,
Yes,
three?
yes,
yes.
please do, please do.
All the three presentations were really exhaustive, detail for, uh, and then I think Bina kept on asking question why what Rushdie. I had the same question in mind. What does he achieve by the interplay of myth, history, imagination, etc., etc.? I think the researcher has failed. Could have just said that, as usual, his satirical
Mhm.
presentation, yes, through his satire, I think the reader gets to know the, I mean, whatever comes in between. Okay, the truth. Monica's presentation, though it was history, we were reliving the Bangladesh war and all through her. It was very detailed, but I mean, as usual, we didn't have the literary, much of the literary connection, but the presentations show that history can be written from different perspectives. Then Poulomi Saha's was really I had the same I had one question to find out whether, because the writer is a because the writer is a US citizen, is there anything different, the differently was the history presented differently? I think because it's from the third person's, I mean, I think there is some bit of that. As what she tried to tell, I think, was this, that the truth about both the voiceless people and the ones with the voice, right, has
Yes,
come to
yes,
know.
ma'am.
And I'm glad to see that all the three presentations today came from India and places related to India, instead of choosing, though the writers were from other places. Maybe this was, I mean, all of India was highlighted. I think we want more works researched from India. Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank,
all the presenters.
thank you.
Yes,
So, can I move on?
yes, you
Is
can.
my
Waiting.
presentation visible?
Yes, yes, it is. It
Yes, yes,
is.
thank you. So, at the outset, thank you to In Tandem for including me into this wonderful venture. I'm so glad I'm here, and I was really enjoying the papers, and the content of which was so close to what I'm going to try and share with you this evening. So, thank you so much, Dr. Preeti, and your team. And I hope I do some justice for having brought me here. So the presentation I have titled as History as Narrative. Maybe, you can take off from what we just heard. We heard Mahalakshmi in her introduction talk about how literature reflects history. And then you had Monika questioning about textbooks. As she was talking about perspectives, she was talking about the relevance of textbooks and how correct are these textbooks. And that was a very valid question, because it is these textbooks that unravel history to us, and we still have what we have learned in those readers as our knowledge of history. And Poulomi spoke about the narrative style as the most suitable form of expression for sharing historical knowledge. I think that would be the takeoff of my presentation too. So just inserted a quote, a very familiar quote from George Orwell there. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. I think we can keep this in mind as we move along, and maybe after that too, because this quote is of great relevance today. And even as I was gathering my thoughts to make this presentation, I couldn't help noticing the coincidence, where we are pitched in, where history has come into our conversations, the veracity of history, the past has come into our conversations, into our debates, both at the national level and at the international level. For security reasons, I don't want to mention the events but I'm sure you know what I am talking about. So I begin here. Are historians storytellers? Is it possible to tell true stories about the past? Now, these are not my questions, but these were questions that came among the scholars, predominantly from the American historians, historical scientists, as they call it. And this happened somewhere around the 1960s. Now, this was not a debate that pertained only to history as narrative. This was a debate that came about narrative itself as general. Now, why did this burst out? It is because there seemed to be a paradigm shift into to a kind of difference between story and narrative. So till then, we were familiar with the fabula and the sujet, the story, where we talk about a beginning, a middle, and an end. And sometimes narrative became a synonym to story. But here there were debates, and there were talks as to how both were taking different paths, and how narrative was stepping into areas which until then did not allow it to come into. That is, there was a strong division. Simple reason being, story was always embedded with imagination. So therefore, story, when you use the word story or the term story, it means not true. So therefore, story was not a too welcome term, or not something that was related to facts. So when you talk about history, and because history is truth, objective facts, can it be presented as a narrative? So this is the debate that went on. So the narrative character of history. So this is a debate that became strong in 1960s to the present day, a debate which was looking at historical narrative as a mode of explanation. Because until then, we had chronicles, we had, just details written down as history. There wasn't much of historical explanation given. And therefore, writers, authors began to feel that narrative style is the most suitable form of explanation for sharing historical knowledge. So that is how this debate came through. And of course, historians found themselves in sharp disagreement also about the role and status of narrative in history, because on one side, including narrative into history was a breakthrough. On the other, it was also a point of contention. So somewhere about 1965, that was when these debates started, in the pages of a journal called History and Theory, and I have put the main debates there. I'm not going to go into detail because we do not have time. So whether narrative history, whether we can consider it as a legitimate form of knowledge, can conventional history books be substituted with narrative history? So we can think of the presenters we just listened to, what they were referring to. So they were all moving away from mainstream history books or history documents. So how legitimate it is as a form of knowledge. And history is essentially, it's a narrative mode of knowing. So that knowing, understanding, explaining, reconstructing the past is so important. Perhaps that the lack of it is what is reflected in our society, what is reflected world over, and therefore we need to brood about this. And historical narrative, how it makes historical studies meaningful, interesting, and how it gives us explanations of the human past. So history is no longer a subject that is appealing in the classroom or anywhere, because it does not become meaningful, because it is not interesting. So this that is why even a bachelor's degree in history is do not have any takers. It has been sidelined. So the accusation is that because it is not made meaningful. So these debates happened around the 60s. And narratives, when history is presented as narratives, it enhances historical understanding and intelligibility. So this was a strong point that these scholars had. And therefore, they felt constructing stories about the past that reflects life, consciousness, and human existence would make, historical explanations a lot more meaningful. So the implication of these debates, now when you talk about it among all these scholars, so the implication was to grasp what is the explanatory content of these writings. The readers, sorry, yes, so how they have to be able to complement a story. That is, sometimes we talk about learning language in context. Here they felt to embed history into a story would help to understand the history behind it. So now this was the first level of the debates, and the second strand again went on to how able the readers would be to follow the story, and what is the capacity for readers to follow a sequence, because then it would be sequence, the actions and events would be sequence, then they'll have to travel through time, the temporal part of it. So that debate also continued with this. So now all these debates were primarily on the explanation and causation in history. So the main, what to say, scholars who went to argue about this was Martin White and Arthur Danto. And Dre's survey of these debates, he tried to explain the two main strands of this debate. One is that the historical narrative. So by the 60s, history from bare chronology of facts started to move into narratives, to be written in a narrative style. So they started defending it by saying that it is a series of explanatory statements which were giving causal sequences. So this happened, why did this happen? And then the connection of the past events. And Danto argued that this logical structure of the sequence distinguished the narration, historical narration, from the other forms of explanations that existed. So they felt, therefore, they were batting for history as narrative. So the crucial insight that evolved out of all these debates, particularly to place narrative for historical understanding, is that narrative is a typical mode of explanation employed by historians. So that is what they felt was the most suitable and most reachable. So all this happened, as I told you, because of the narrative turn that took place in the 1960s, where narrative disseminated into all other forms, into social sciences and all other forms. And that is why it is collectively called as a narrative turn. And the three successive phases that can be identified after this narrative turn in 1960s is an interest in narrative theory. That's where you have narratology as a field of research, and narrative inquiry as a field of research, and then also as an explicitly known identity concept to identify something as a narrative. So this happened in a large scale. And there were also four different turns, of course, with different agendas and attitudes towards narrative. And what interests us, maybe the historiography and the literary narratology that came along with it. But this turn was there in the literary theory, social sciences, even case studies, psychology, medicine. All these also started incorporative narrative, and therefore there was finally a cultural and societal turn to narration. The hitherto wall that they had, that anything that is narrated is combined with imagination. There is a mix of imagination. There's not that, I mean, you cannot rely on the facts that is told as a narrative, was slowly broken. So here, to specifically talk about history as narrative, I think this was spoken loud and clear by Hayden White. And this happened, immediately after the narrative turn. And his book, The Meta History, 1973, has this particular quote, which you can see is quoted almost everywhere. It has become, it is ubiquitous in its defense of history as a narrative. So where he defends that a historical work can have a verbal structure. So until then, it was something that was denied, not approved. But here he defended, and he strongly affirmed that a verbal structure is suitable for a narrative prose discourse, and which classifies the past structures and processes in order to explain what they were representing. So he was clear about this, and he came out with this statement. Of course, it was not received received well. There were many who were against it, but at the same time, it appealed to many authors. It appealed to many historians, and encouraged them to present history as narrative. So in his other work, The Historical Text as a Literary Artifact, he started applying theories of fiction to historical writing. Now, this was something that was done differently. So that is why I have brought Hayden White here. So history is narrative, that is breaking away from just writing down facts or compiling facts. He was defending historical fiction or history in fiction. Now, this again is not anything new. If we remember Scott's Ivanhoe, always acclaimed as one of the best historical fiction. Even as a student, I always learned it was good fiction, but never really knew why exactly it was being acclaimed as one of the best historical fiction. The truth is that the facts of Scotland that is included in the fiction is true. If you check on it factually, it is all true. It would be close to any historical record. So that is why it is spoken of, and it was something that was done it was a romance, and it was done so very skillfully at that point of time. So history has always been part of the narrative, and here Hayden White claimed that we can use the conventions of fiction to write history. That is, to embed history into a narrative. So that is where he raised the question, why should there be disciplinary boundaries between history and literature? So the facts versus fiction, because he was talking about having bridges rather than boundaries. So he coined the term meta-history, which is familiar to many of us now. And this theory he put forth to blur the disciplinary distinctions between historiography and literature. So just to have, a detail, what is a narrative? Because we talk about story and narrative. So particularly for the students, narrative today is defined as events in sequence of often with a causal link between them. And E.M. Foster very beautifully has given us this illustration where he says the king died and then the queen died. So that's a story. You have a beginning, you have a middle and an end. But when there is a causal link, the king died and the queen died of grief, it becomes plot. And how this plot is sequenced, perhaps we can say or understand, is the narrative. So a narrative is basically about a how and why situation, how and why an event came to be. And invariably in history, this is what we do. How something happened, why happened, and that gives us a historical explanation, and that gives us an understanding of history. So when we talk about history as narrative, a historian doesn't just find history, but he also makes it. That is, particularly, I'm talking about a historical fiction. So there, the events have to be arranged in a certain order, answering questions. So even as I was listening to the presentations, particularly to the last one, Poulomi's, I thought you could have used this analysis. What happened, when, and how, and why, therefore giving an explanation to the historical event that you were talking about. So that gives an explanation. So, and that perhaps maybe the way the author has placed too, if you can analyze the narrative of the novel in this perspective. What happened and when did it happen? How did it happen and why? So when this analysis has happened, the history that is there in the narrative becomes clear. And therefore, the author would have to decide which events in the chronicle is to be included and exclude, giving certain events and subordinating others. Now, this is again a debatable issue. There can be so much that can be spoken about, because there are many who have, criticized this and come out with a lot of criticism. And particularly, you have Carr, who does say that when you talk about choosing events or choosing facts, it's like taking a fish. It's like fishing from the ocean. So when you go about fishing, which fish would you take? So you just catch a fish, and you may choose to keep certain fishes and let go the rest. So how do you decide to retain the fish, and how do you decide to throw away some? So there comes the issue of the author also choosing the events that is to be included in the narrative. So this issue is there. What is chosen? How does an author choose, and how does he? What does he decide not to choose? Nevertheless, the events that the author chooses becomes important. So Hayden White again spoke about how a historian answers these questions maybe by three different types of explanation. That is, the emplotment. He gives an explanation by the emplotment that he uses, the argument, and the ideological implication. Because history, as all of us understand, cannot be written without a particular ideology. So these three, he feels a historian may have to answer when he puts it in a narrative, and therefore even the author. So history is a narrative. A historian does not just find history when he puts it in narrative, just as we saw Rushdie's Victory City being analyzed. Historians also employ historical imagination. That could be, for an experiential value, or it could be for making it enchanting, and, through the enchantment, making us understand the history. It could be anything. That is why I asked Pashini that question too. So when he's depicting the past, so that's a narrative strategy that the writer may use or employ to bring forth what he otherwise want us to get, or what has to reach us. So history, therefore, is narrative prose. Of course, literary conventions are used, but then along with the historian's imagination, and there lies a skill. And then again, it can be a matter of analysis, where you can look into what exactly has come under the conventions and what exactly has gone into the imagination, which will give us a perspective as to how history as a narrative unfolds there. So there again, White famously spoke about the types of plots or emplotments. I'm not going into detail. He gives how even history as narrative will invariably at large fall into any one of these plots. So when you come to analyze a narrative, this I particularly want to put it forth to the students here. Barthes came with this introduction to the structural analysis of narrative in 1966, where again he declared how narrative has seeped into all forms of human interaction. And therefore, when we analyze a narrative, he has identified these levels, main levels. This is something that we can use when we analyze fiction or any form of narrative, when we try and look into how it can be a historical narrative, or what is the history that, or the historical events that are included in the narrative. So the functions, so the main levels he says are functions, action, and narration. And in functions, he's only talking about the functional units. So there may be several functional units in a narrative. So this is not only pertaining to historical narrative. Any narrative will have functional units. It could be a red sweater or a gun. What we all are familiar with, the usage of the Chekhov's gun. So when Chekhov speaks about a gun in his short story, we know it is going to be used. So when the author talks about a sweater as red sweater, you know the red has a significance. So that way, if we can analyze the narrative and look at the functions of each unit, it would make us understand what is the effort taken by the author and the purpose of these units in framing the narrative. So again, lack of time, I'm not going into the other aspects of functions. I think to some extent it is self-explanatory. So where he categorizes under functions, the nuclei, the catalyst, the indices, and the informants, all these are functions that you can identify within a narrative. So what is the nuclei? Which aspect, which event, or which description is the nuclei? What is that that happens in a narrative that becomes a catalyst to keep the narrative moving? So what is it that diffuses information? Who are the informants? It could be the subplot, it could be the characters. So when we make an analysis, you understand how the writer so carefully uses a narrative to unfold an event or unfold a plot. So the action, and therefore the other functions, the other levels of description, action and narration. So the same thing could be spoken about in a historical narrative too. So of course we have the stories and chronicles which are linear or which are straightforward. But then when history comes as a narrative explanation, it always will make us analyze X happened, then the causal effect. So this would always be there in a historical narrative or in a historical fiction. So this happened and then this happened. So when we can identify that and match it with history or the mainstream history or the factual history, we can understand how the author or the writer would have used history in his narrative. Then the continuity, difference, and change. So this differs from that. So that is again something that gives us an explanation. That is something that gives us a more understanding. For example, if we have a historical record, a famine happened, a Bengal famine, 1977. So when it is a record, it is just a record. So it does not give us historical explanation. The record or the chronicle does not give us historical understanding. But in a narrative, this happened, this differs from that. This famine is not like that, or this is not that. When such a difference is shown, we understand the severity of this and the importance of this particular event in history. So therefore, in the narrative, you would have narrative agents, narrative explications, the different explanations that come from different sources. I'm not elaborating on it. I'm just giving these as pointers. You can go back and read up more on this, which will help you in analyzing the structure of a historical narrative and the different occurrences that happens in a narrative. What happened? So what you can list it out. What are the different happenings that are included? What happened? And the narrative identities, the prior, what are the events that happened before? What are the subsequent events? And in totality, how are these arranged? So the skill of of an author in a historical narrative would be in this narrative, how he sequences it, the occurrences, how he singles certain events for notice, how certain events are put in a subtle manner, how they are linked. All this would make us understand how history unfolds in a narrative. Now, when you talk about historical fiction, and I also told you how Hayden White spoke about blurring boundaries, how we can use fictional conventions to write non-fiction, because history comes in a lot of non-fiction too. So two genres that have become popular today would be the creative nonfiction and narrative nonfiction, where techniques and styles of fiction, that is, the conventional character, plot, conflict, they are used to tell a story. One example that I want to put forth is The Emperor of All Maladies, an award-winning work, nonfiction. It won the Pulitzer Award for nonfiction. It's an in-depth, biography of cancer. And what is striking about this narrative is that it is a complete detail of how cancer came to be identified as a disease, the first stages of research, and therefore how it moved on to where we stand till a point of time. All the details given there are facts and facts only. But you have even dialogues there. He has introduced even dialogues between the researcher and the researcher going in search of sponsors, funds, all that become dialogues. And the end of it, it is a biography of cancer written using fictional conventions. So I don't think we would be reading the history of cancer, or we would feel interested to read it in any other manner, or even have an understanding of how cancer came to be and how it came to be diagnosed as a deadly disease, and the different stages of research and medicine that came into it. So it makes interesting reading it, and it doesn't scare us, but it is more into how you would read a story. Similarly, you have narrative journalism too, where journals like River Teeth, they bring about incidents, political and historical, but then give it to us in the form of a narrative. And even I don't know if Caravan is still published, but Caravan is again another long form narrative journalism. So if you were to take any political event or historical event, what you will see in Caravan would be a totally different narrative. As I told you, if you analyze the narrative style, you can see how these events have been sequenced. You will find the what and why and everything there, and therefore the historical explanation and the historical understanding becomes a lot more easier. Now, when Hayden White spoke about using fictional conventions to write history in a non-fiction manner, many opposed, and there were many. Like even Virginia Woolf constantly spoke about how fiction and non-fiction cannot be written, cannot be interconnected, and the boundaries be better kept apart. So therefore, you also have here another scholar who strongly opposed Hayden White, and she became a landmark of modern poetics because she felt that the nature of fiction can be identified in three topics. So she gave a new perspective to even analyze fiction. So where she brought these properties, the referential properties and the textual marks of fictionality, and the relationship between these in a historical narrative. So why I wanted to introduce you to Dorrit Conn is because we have a lot of history written as non-fiction. So that, like if you take an author like Tharoor, he has written fiction, which is a historical narrative, and he's written non-fiction, which also has a lot of history. And if we were to make a comparison between the two, and if we were to analyze the history that is found in both the kind of writings of fiction and non-fiction, that is where we can apply the referential narratives and the non-referential narratives there. So, and referential narratives are predominantly history, biography, autobiography. Interestingly, even Ramachandra Guha, I just read in the papers in December, is coming out with a book. I think it is HarperCollins which is bringing it out, where he is compiling and is also writing biographies. So biographies as early as that of Ashoka. So that is because even you know how he's an acclaimed historian. So even they have found these narratives as referential narratives that can unravel history. And in an interview, he does speak about it. So these, whether it is history, biography, or autobiography, they are referential narratives which can take us into the facts of history for a better understanding and a better explanation of history, far above than the conventional textbooks or the documents or the records. So they make better assertions about the actual world. And non-referential narratives are perhaps what you can find in historical fiction, where they create a world to which they refer. So here Dorrit Kahn says, in a historical narrative, we need to differentiate between the referential and the non-referential and make an analysis. And she feels you cannot bring the conventions of fiction into a non-fiction. Anyway, this is also something that young researchers can research, and particularly when you are doing fiction or non-fiction, you can go on to look into all these factors. Now, even as we talk about history as narrative, and I told you it began with the debates in the 60s, and it has come to become an accepted form of representing history, of giving history, the knowledge of history, for historical explanation, for understanding. Nevertheless, the climate of post-truth has affected history again. So even as we were trying, or even as the historians were trying to settle history into a narrative and bring it closer to human understanding, we have stepped into a post-truth world. Particularly, this word, as many of you may know, was a word chosen by the Oxford Dictionary, is the most popular word in 2016. And ever since, there's been a lot of understanding about this term. So this word particularly came post the Brexit and Donald Trump's election. Just to educate those who may not know this term, it is just about how this term refers to a situation where we are influenced. When you're presenting truth, or when any facts are presented, rather than depending on objective facts or truth, human minds have now come to depend on or be influenced by their own beliefs or by their own imagination. So whatever appeals to their emotion, whatever appeals to their belief, is what is believed more than facts. So facts have been buried. So therefore, we start asking the question, what is the relevance of facts in the post-truth world? So we were struggling with establishing facts. So we began with chronicles, and we began to accept historical facts and narrative, because we considered that as the best form of historical explanation and understanding. And now we have moved into this post-truth world, where I just refer to, thanks to your invite, I stumbled on this book and I went on to read this, which is very interesting. This is a book that is brought out by Routledge, History in a Post-Truth World, Theory and Praxis. So I have taken these details from this book, which was published in 2018. So where they talk about a history of negationism, where we negate, and particularly you find the scholar who has researched on this talk about how even genocide is now negated. And I don't want to state what is being negated in the Indian society, what is negated today about Indian history. A lot of details, a lot of leaders have been negated, their actions, their contributions have been negated. We are witnessing it. So this, they say, is one of the possible genealogies of the post-truth. So that is why, to the presenters, I was even asking, then finally, what is truth? That is where we stand today. Because there is a lot of construction of alternative facts for political and ideological ends. I think it is Paulima who spoke about this, that facts are being tampered for political and ideological ends. We are witnessing it. So what are the reliable truths and reliable news? Today we take in a lot of history, or we take in a lot of facts through news, the social media. So how reliable are they? So therefore, we need to ask this question: who controls the past, who controls the present and the future? So we started off with Orwell's quote that one who controls the present will control the past. And therefore, we need to ask, who's controlling the past today? So what qualifies as facts, and by who? These are serious questions for which we need to have an answer. And as academicians, we need to make sure that what we transfer to the students before us, or when we do research, are we really handling facts in the sense real fact? Because when we talk about truth, again, which truth? What is truth? Does truth exist? All these questions come. So therefore, you have post-truth history as been identified with three essential elements. That is an indifference to historicity. So these come from the loud voices, from the powerful voices, and we are trapped in it. And just as something that is characteristic of the post-truth world, the appeal is to the emotion or and personal belief. It could be your caste, it could be your regionalism, it could be nationalism, it could be a color, it could be race, it could be anything. All these seem to be embroiled in history, and of course the ideological motivation behind all this. So I think any study of history in today's world cannot escape discussing these aspects, because the history that is being tampered with is not the facts of today, but what is frightening is that the facts of yesterday are also being negated. So I conclude my presentation with this conclusion, which is there in that book, The Post-Truth History in the Post-Truth World. And this is something that Henry Rousseau has concluded his introduction there, which I thought was so relevant. How history, when we look for objective truth in history, it is a fight. It has always been a fight. But it is not a fight for the real truth, because that real truth is questionable, but even less for my truth. But what we may hope for, or what we may have to prepare in whatever capacity we can, is the perpetuation of a particularly shared space where there are conditions to write history or a new story, and that should remain transparent and accessible to all. And here I feel literature is that best place where more and more authors can come. So post 1981, we have seen that in India, whether it is Rushdie or Tharoor or Mistry, and it goes on even regional literature. So that could be a space where this can come out, where it can be more transparent. And as Poulomi said, how the unheard voices, where it has been heard from. And maybe this can be the space from where we can ultimately, at the end of it, get history as history should be. So I'll leave you with a few books that you can refer. If it is of any interest, you can take a click and use them, because these are all very useful books which will help you to go more into understanding how history has come to represent as a narrative. So I think there begins the point at which we can take charge of history. When I say we from the world of literature, dealing with books, we can take charge of history and speak more about it, so that more and more readers are inclined to read literature for history. Thank you.
Thank you, Beena.
No, thank you, Beena. It felt as if you're listening to you at some at some seminar,
Thank you.
right? This is very.
I just made it as brief as possible because there were
Yes.
students and I lack of time too.
Yeah.
But if there's anything more that you think I can offer, please reach out to me.
Yes,
Beena, may I take this opportunity to introduce Professor Shreya?
Yes, Shreya.
She's a board member. She's from Central University, Jharkhand. Shreya, that's Beena.
Hello, Shreya. Nice meeting you. Yes, we can see your face now. Thank you.
It was wonderful listening to you.
Thank you.
And two of my scholars presented, Poulomi and Monika.
Really great. That was really good. I felt close because this is my area of research and I was feeling very close to their papers.
Yes. I just wanted to add something that this Stuart Blackburn,
yes,
he is himself an anthropologist.
Yes.
And he has worked 10 years with the Apatanis, and he has actually stayed there for more than 2.5 years. And he speaks the language.
Okay.
And you know that's why when you read the book, he has also written two anthropological treatises on the Apatanis. So when you read this novel, it has an entirely different feel. So I am myself interested in the Northeast. I was there in Arunachal for almost 3 years. So
But that's the Northeast history. Is it there in the mainstream records of history? Because I also have this feeling that when it comes to Northeast, because there, I assume I may be wrong. There isn't much of what to say history written, that is mainstream history written, like say many other regions. Uh, so therefore, would these voices be accepted?
you are right in the sense that not much is documented, and what is documented in the in the colonial
Yes,
archives, and
yes,
later by the mainland Indian
Mm.
uh, archives. And that is why I feel that the writers from the northeast of India, their voices become particularly important.
true.
Whether we speak of somebody like Stuart Blackburn, of course, he doesn't really come from there, but then there is this whole debate about outsider and insider. But if you think about somebody like Mamang Dai, for example, who is also writing about history from the Adi point of view, another tribe, or somebody like Janice Pariat or whoever, and in or Temsula Au or Eastern Kire, and their voices become very important because since there are no other voices, to talk about these marginalized peripheral histories.
Yes, Shreya, how far is very relevant narrative? I mean, on the tribals he lived with. How
Yes,
far is it authentic? Is it?
it is
Oh,
to a large extent it is, but then one has to also keep in mind that he was writing almost uh, 50 to 60 years back, even more. So
yeah.
you see that a lot has happened since then. The perspectives have changed, the ideologies have changed. So those
Mhm.
things are there.
So
But then he
then
was,
the next person I've read mostly is Mahashweta Devi's accounts of all not the northeast, of course, the tribals up north, all the
yes,
rest.
yes, 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 yes. Hers, of course, is, I mean, so is very relevant, but
Mm.
Mashweta Devi's voices, the voices that she records, and later Ganesh Devi. I mean, those voices are,
Mm.
of course, authentic, uh, to a large extent, authentic voices. But these voices, the voices of these writers from the Northeast, which are coming up recently,
Yes.
they are remarkable, remarkable. And the way they blend history and fiction, that is also remarkable, especially Mamang Dai and Eastern Kire. Also Temsula Au. Many of them, many of them.
Okay. But many of them have started writing in English now, no?
They are writing in English because that is also about what Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak would call epistemic violence. You see, the languages are
Uh-huh.
in
Yeah.
such a state they're now learning the languages. Like
Yes.
Mamandai, while writing in English, is learning Adi. Similarly, in Jharkhand, Jacinta Kirketta, while writing in Hindi, is learning Kuduk. This has happened in
Mhm.
all these belts. The languages are almost gone.
There is a lot of collective memory that is there in the Northeast, even
Mm.
among the people, right?
Yes, yes. In fact, one extraordinary thing that I found, they have these genealogies which they sing,
Mm.
but uh, even my students, they would be able to sing their genealogies and go back to the mythic ancestor. But now that it has started being documented, uh, that is gradually also disappearing. It is very interesting. And when I first heard them singing, it reminded me of the many warriors in the Iliad, you know. You remember they would sing the genealogy of the warriors. It is like that, you know. They can do it. So those things are there. Many things are there. Many things are.
So this has helped the authenticity to be retained, right? Because
Yes,
of all this. This
yes.
advantage, I don't think the rest of India may have had.
No, I think it is only in the tribal belts, even in the rest of India, that this has been retained to a certain extent, you know. And also the shamans, they have, I mean, they hold the responsibility for retaining the collective memory of the community. So certain things have remained, but
Have there been disputes over the facts, or is it accepted unanimously
I
among the
think
tribes?
uh, Arunachal Pradesh is a very interesting place, you know, where uh, even the identities are still in transition. Like uh, a big, apart from a big tribe might come out and claim identity as an independent tribe. Two tribes can come together and become one big tribe. It is still happening. You know, if you stay there, you can still see it happening. It is still
External
fluid.
forces can come and influence them.
Now, I think it is difficult because they are very conscious about their identities, very conscious, and they are the people who are, you know, kind of, what should I say, this revitalization of their ethnicity, identity. These are also going on in a big way. So it's an interesting place to be in. It is good to meet you, Beena.
Thank you. Same here too. Same here too.
Good. I think everyone must be hungry, must be, so we'll have the vote of thanks, Mahalakshmi.
Yes, ma'am. We have come to the end of this session. Adi, it's an honor to propose the oath of thanks. I thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Beena Thomas, for sharing his invaluable insight on literature and history. I thank our college principal for her constant support. Our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Maniapati Srinivasan, Associate Professor and Head Department of English, for providing various research opportunities to the research scholars. I would like to thank our paper presenters, Ms. Monika Rani, Ms. Poulomi Saha, and Ms. Pashini, for sharing their valuable insights. I thank all the staff members and research scholars who are present at this forum. Thank you all. We will meet again after a fortnight on 2nd February 2024 with the topic Interdisciplinary Studies, Literature and Development Studies. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Good seeing you, Shreya. Thank you, Srilata. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Bye bye.
Maria. Good seeing you.